There is a specific kind of discomfort that doesn't show up dramatically. It appears in small pauses. When someone asks what you're doing with your life and you hesitate half a second too long, when you look at your own reflection and feel strangely unfamiliar. When the version of yourself that once felt solid suddenly feels like it belongs to someone else. It's the anxiety of being undefined. Not totally lost or broken, just not fully formed in the way the world seems to expect. We are living in a time that treats identity as a finished product, something that should be clear and articulated, optimized at best. You're supposed to know your values and your goals, your 5-year plan, your niche, your direction, and if you don't, there's an unspoken assumption that you're behind. But what if the discomfort isn't a sign that something is wrong? What if it's actually a sign that you're still alive, in a way that the world doesn't quite know how to categorize, and maybe we don't really have to categorize everything, so let's take a look at this whole topic of the anxiety of being undefined. One of the defining features of modern life is the demand for coherence. We are constantly asked to present a consistent narrative about ourselves. Universities want a statement of purpose, employers want a clear career trajectory, social media wants a recognizable aesthetic. Even friendships often rely on predictability. You are the funny one, you are the stable one, you are the kind one. Sociologists have pointed out that in late modernity, identity becomes kind of a project, something to construct, refine, and also display. The self is no longer something you simply inhabit, it's something you manage. This constant self-management subtly shifts the way we experience our own interior life even. Instead of asking, what am I feeling right now, we begin to ask ourselves, does this fit who I am supposed to be? Research on self-concept clarity shows that when people feel uncertain about who they are, they experience higher levels of anxiety and rumination. But what's fascinating is that this anxiety increases even more when individuals believed they are expected to have a stable identity. In other words, the pressure of clarity intensifies the distress of uncertainty. And clarity has become currency. The cleaner your narrative, the easier you are to process. And the easier you are to process, the more socially rewarded you become, and so on. But coherence is not the same as wholeness. Don't mix those two things up. A story can be neat and still incomplete. Wow, such a nice rhyme. And if you begin to sense that your current story no longer fits, if the edges feel tight, the anxiety begins. But why does that anxiety feel so existential? Developmental psychology never promised us a permanent self. Erik Erikson's model of psychosocial development framed identity as an ongoing negotiation. Adolescence may intensify it, but adulthood reopens it repeatedly. For example, your career shifts, parenthood, loss or illness or relocation. All of these destabilize the self. You do not simply add new chapters to your life, you revise earlier ones. Modern neuroscience supports this fluidity. The brain remains plastic across the lifespan. That means experiences continuously reshape neural networks. Your preferences, emotional responses, and even aspects of your personality are more malleable than we like to admit. So biologically, you are designed for adaptation. But culturally, you are rewarded for consistency. This mismatch creates friction. You evolve internally, but the world often relates to a previous version of you and they don't really see it. And when the internal update becomes too large to ignore, you feel misaligned, not only with others, but within your own past and within your own self. Philosopher Paul Ricoeur distinguished between identity as sameness and identity as selfhood. Sameness is continuity over time. Selfhood is the capacity to reinterpret yourself. The anxiety of being undefined often emerges when these two forms diverge. So when you no longer feel the sameness you once relied on, but haven't yet stabilized into a new selfhood. And in that in-between space, the ground feels unstable, of course. Which brings us to something deeper. Why does instability feel like danger in the first place? Uncertainty is not just philosophical, it's physiological. Studies in affected neuroscience show that Ambiguity activates brain regions associated with threat detection. The amygdala responds strongly to unpredictability because, from an evolutionary perspective, of course, unpredictability could signal danger. But identity uncertainty carries a specific layer of threat: social instability. For most of human history, belonging determined survival. To be excluded from a group meant exposure. Identity was not self-expression, it was protection. Today, we don't face exile in the same way, of course, but our nervous system hasn't fully updated, which is often the cause of all of our problems like anxiety. Our nervous system is still wired for the good old days, but our way of living has changed drastically. When we feel undefined, we may unconsciously interpret it as a social risk. And so it's like, if I don't know who I am, will others know where to place me? And if they can't place me, will I still belong? This helps explain why rigid identities are kind of seductive. For example, political extremism, hyper-specific subcultures, even intense career identifications can provide psychological relief because they reduce ambiguity. But relief is not resolution. The more tightly you grip a definition to avoid uncertainty, the less space you leave for growth. But growth, by its nature, disrupts belonging. So the real question becomes, what are you willing to sacrifice for stability? There is a small danger in defining yourself too early and too rigidly. Research on self-complexity suggests that individuals who define themselves across multiple dimensions are more resilient when one dimension is threatened. But those who hinge their identity on a single domain, for example, I am a doctor, a really resilient doctor. These people are more vulnerable to emotional collapse when that domain falters. A fixed self is efficient, yes, but it is brittle. Existential philosophers understood this long before psychology measured it. Søren Kierkegaard described despair as the refusal to become oneself, either by clinging to a narrow version of identity or by avoiding commitment altogether. The self, in his view, is a dynamic synthesis. To freeze is to distort it. And yet we are constantly encouraged to freeze it, to brand ourselves, to specialize early, to find our thing, whatever it is, and double down. There's nothing wrong with commitment, don't get me wrong. The problems begin when commitment becomes confinement, because life will inevitably introduce experiences that don't fit your chosen narrative. And it's good that this happens. And when that happens, you either expand or you fracture. But expanding means entering that undefined space again. And most of us would rather endure quiet dissatisfaction than visible uncertainty, which leads to something even more uncomfortable. There is a grief in outgrowing a former self, not because that self was wrong, but because it was familiar, it felt safe. And when you change deeply, the people around you feel it. Sometimes they celebrate it, sometimes they don't like it and resist it. Not maliciously, but just instinctively. Stability in relationships relies on predictability. And they also want to live a predictable life, so maybe they get triggered by you changing yourself. Sociologist Irving Goffman argued that identity is co-constructed. That means others participate in stabilizing who you are, so when you evolve, you are not the only one adjusting. This is why growth can feel lonely. Not dramatic, huge loneliness, but just subtle misalignment in friendships or in general. Conversations may feel slightly off and expectations don't quite match. You begin to sense that the person others see is not fully synchronized with who you are becoming, and this could hurt a lot. And here the anxiety sharpens, because being undefined doesn't just mean you lack clarity, it can mean others lose their grip on you. But what if that loss of grip is necessary? Psychologically, research on ambiguity tolerance consistently shows that people who can endure uncertainty without rushing toward premature closure demonstrate greater creativity, adaptability, and long-term well-being. They are not immune to anxiety, but they simply do not let anxiety dictate identity. To remain undefined is not to be directionless. It is to resist finalizing yourself before your experiences have had the chance to reshape you. Simone de Beauvoir wrote that human existence is characterized by transcendence, the capacity to move beyond what we currently are. And that movement is uncomfortable because it dissolves certainty, which we seem to love so much. But it is also what makes freedom possible. The anxiety of being undefined might never fully disappear, but perhaps it is not meant to. Perhaps it is the emotional signal that transformation is underway. The real danger may not be confusion, it may be settling too soon. So when you feel that quiet discomfort, that sense of not having a clear and stable answer, consider the possibility that you are not behind. And transition really is not failure, and I know it's sometimes hard to believe that because people expect things of you. But to be honest, transition, it's a motion. And motion, even when uncertain, is proof that you are still becoming and that everything is fine.